What's going on, everyone? So I am here to talk about the set 1 leaders that I think are going to be rising for set 2 in value. Leaders that you might want to take a double look at because they may not be top of the meta, or maybe they are right now, but I think they're going to be, well, either close to the top or potentially remain the top of the meta as set 2 releases, based on already some of the cards that we've seen in set 2, some of the synergies that we're seeing, and of course, well, come on. Boba's gotta be one of the top leaders still. I mean, he has the underworld tag already. Let's dive into our top 5 here and dive into all the different reasons why. If you want to pick up any of the cards here, any of the leaders here that we're going to talk about, be sure to use my TCG player link in the description down below. And without further ado, let's talk about our first one on the list. So our first leader on the list is going to be Luke Skywalker. Now, this one is probably the least controversial and probably the most obvious of all the leaders on this list, mainly because, well, FFG and the designers over there actually ended up stating that Luke is going to get better. They feel like Luke is one of the leaders that does get better with set 2. And there's a few reasons why. One of the reasons that I want to initially start with might not be so obvious, and that is Luke generally is positioned as a mid-range leader. And what that means is they want to get to sort of the middle of the game, not play a controlling role, but get to the point where maybe they deal with some of your early threats and then play out more powerful threats or more powerful synergies to leverage their more powerful cards in the middle parts of the game in order to outvalue you. And with the shield tokens, Luke does this really well because they can turn some of these units into way more powerful threats because of that shield token. Now, not only that, but we're also seeing some really powerful synergies with upgrades and shields specifically in the set, right? If we look at something like a Rose Tico, which is kind of the card made for Luke Skywalker, to be honest, we have a 2/6 shielded that can defeat shield tokens in your other units, giving 2 experience tokens to that unit. If you play this on, turn 4, you can actually give her a second shield token. So 2 shield tokens on Rose Tico, which is absolutely obnoxious to deal with. If you ECL this out on turn 3, you could potentially defeat a shield token that you placed on a unit on turn 2, or even turn 1 on, let's say, something like a clone deserter. So we're even seeing more powerful heroism units being printed, and in this case we could potentially get a 1 resource 2/3 with the shield token with restore 1, which can actually get you to that middle part of the game, which can be really, really important. So we're already seeing some cards that work particularly good with Luke, and well, some cards that I think will go well in a Luke shell to get you to that middle part of the game and actually leverage those shield tokens and more powerful stats on your leader. So Luke, the first one on our list. I was gonna wait to the end of the video to talk about Boba as our 5th leader, but I figured why not just, bite the bullet right now and talk about Boba, because I do think Boba is gonna get a lot better in set 2. Probably stay at the top or potentially the absolute top of the meta, like the best deck, which we've seen, well, pretty consistently for the past couple of months. Not only is this guy just an absurdly statted leader at 5 resources, a 4/7, but also the leader ability itself works so well in general, but even more specifically, perfectly with bounties. Perfectly with bounties. The whole idea about Boba is that you want to deal with your opponent's units while getting additional resource to enact your own game plan, right? You play a unit, they play a unit, you deal with their unit, you are able to play a unit afterwards where they cannot. Well, guess what? We have a whole theme around bounties and killing your opponent's units to claim those bounties. Well, killing your opponent's units and deal with your opponent's units is exactly what Boba wants to do. Okay, this is extremely, extremely oppressive. Not only that, but he also has the underworld tag. So if you look at underworld cards, we could potentially start seeing an underworld sort of theme brewing, and we even see some really powerful cunning villainy cards already being printed in something like a Dr. Evazan, which we could see easily slotted into a Boba deck potentially, as he already is sort of that early tempo, early aggressive, get in for some early damage. This guy could potentially, put him even more further in that seat. So I do think Boba is going to get way, way better. We even have cards like Fett's Fire Spray that synergize with Boba and Jango. We're already starting to see Jango potentially, even though it doesn't necessarily change anything. We are seeing potentially synergies with Boba in Jango with the bounties and, Overwhelm. We can turn him into a more aggressive deck. I don't think we actually see Jango on this list, but, dealing with your opponent's units in overwhelming them and then killing your opponent's base at the same time. We could potentially see a more aggro Boba list in like Boba red instead of Boba green. I could definitely see something like that. We also don't know what the bases are going to be looking like, so Boba red, Boba blue, something like that. Double yellow Boba. These are all things that could potentially happen and be a lot more interesting than what we just have right now, which is Boba green and Boba yellow. I think Boba is going to get a lot more scary come set 2. Another leader that we got to talk about has a very similar idea to Boba Fett in that you don't actually need any specific synergies for these cards to be powerful. You just leverage either additional resources or getting ahead on resource, and that's exactly what Han does. So I do think Han is going to get a lot better come set 2, mainly because we're going to see a lot more powerful potential 7 resource plays. And one of the things that Han does struggle with is the fact that you run out of cards very quickly. But guess what? This new smuggle mechanic allows you to potentially go ahead and, well, put a card down as a resource, smuggle it out, right? And then, well, you smuggled it out, which means you put the top card of your deck as a resource. You can defeat that one instead of the card you played out of smuggling, which is really, really crazy, right? You could just put all your cards down as resources and then smuggle them out later on in the game. Or you could just play out more powerful threats that we're potentially going to see going forward. Things like even, I think Lando's Falcon here is here, but if not, I'll have to pull it up. Lando's Falcon here is a new card that we're starting to see where, well, it actually costs exactly the same as a smuggle card. And look at that. We have a little Twitter post from FFG that I can talk about here. Things like Millennium Falcon, where you get a 5/5 in space for 6 resources, which is decent nice with smuggle. Even Smuggler's Aid, maybe keep him as a more controlling deck, and you being able to leverage the additional resources that you put down on your resource pile as cards, right? Just the ability to use your resource pile as a mechanic with this new smuggle mechanic, and potentially more powerful 7 resource plays that we're potentially seeing in the Casino Han deck, where you can get some really, really high value cards onto the battlefield. Han just seems like a natural fit as an underworld leader, which there seems to be a little bit of a theme here with Underworld Boba and Underworld Han, but he does seem to fit very, very nicely with all of the cards being printed and the new mechanics being introduced. The next one we're going to talk about is Chewbacca, which I know some people have been trying to break. There have been a few tournaments where Chewbacca has taken it all, but I do think this card is a little bit weak. The leader is a little bit weak at the current moment. However, a lot of the vigilance theme with set 2 is grit and having synergistic mechanics and cards with grit itself. Not only that, but we seem to have a little bit of a Wookiee tribe building, as they mentioned they want to add Wookiees and they want to kind of have a grit synergy with Wookiees. Not only that, but Chewbacca also has the Underworld tag, which could be important come set 2, but mainly because of this backside of Chewbacca, I think that he could become a powerful threat as more of a mid-range / control, closing the game out with Chewbacca himself. Having a Sentinel with grit with 9 toughness is just obnoxious, and having a bunch of upgrades be kind of the theme of the set as well could potentially just suit up a Chewbacca and have him be the most absurd Wookiee you've ever seen in your life. But you also have cards like Gentle Giant, which could be really powerful with Chewbacca and other grit cards. Having a 6 resource 2/8 with grit himself and the ability to potentially heal up damage on your other grit units or your other sentinels to make it more difficult to get through could be pretty nice. Again, there seems to be a little bit of a grit synergy theme. Heck, we even see, I think it's First Light, where we see a lot of grit being passed around. Vigilance seems to be the home of grit, and well, we're starting to see mechanics directly interact and synergize with grit itself. So definitely pretty exciting to see maybe Chewbacca come into the fray and be this absolute monster that he truly is in the lore. But there's one more we got to talk about to close us out. Now, of course, there's all manner of leaders that I think are going to get better, like IG with extra 1 resource plays, Emperor Palpatine potentially to get to that leader deployment, more control cards for Vader, Blue, Iden, Krennic. But there's one card that I'm particularly excited about, and that is a Grand Inquisitor. One of the things that Grand Inquisitor doesn't really have right now is the fact that you don't have a lot of 3-powered units that really can take advantage of the fact that you're dealing damage to them and ready them up immediately. I already talked about Chewbacca and the grit synergies, and we've already seen a card printed almost perfectly for Grand Inquisitor as potentially one of the strongest aggro decks that we could field right now. And if we pull that up right here, it is the Death Watch Loyalist here. We have a 3/3 Grit Overwhelm. This is the perfect card for Grand Inquisitor, where you play him, ready him up immediately, attacks for 5, and potentially can kill an opponent's unit while dealing damage to their base because of Overwhelm. So we are already starting to see cards that seemingly are meant for Grand Inquisitor. And don't get me started on things like potentially Hylobon Enforcer as well, which is another Scout Bike Pursuer, right? With a pretty minor drawback of your opponent drawing a card on the bounty, right? This can be an immediate 3/2, just like Scout Bike Pursuer. And if we see more cards with this grit synergy where they have low power, but high toughness and grit, where they might be a 4 resource 3/8 or a 5 resource 3/6 or whatever it is. It doesn't really matter. The fact that it has 3 power and can get more value by attacking or getting damage dealt to it and immediately attacking because of Grand Inquisitor's ability just makes it more and more clear that we could see an extremely powerful Grand Inquisitor aggro deck, as right now we don't really have enough 3-powered units that really do some amazing stuff for you. You have Baze that works perfectly in this Grand Inquisitor type of strategy where you get a 4/3 immediately with potentially Sentinel on 4 resources that can attack, or Rugged Survivors that ends up being a 5/3 on 5 resources that can immediately attack. That's what I want to see. And heck, Rugged Survivors is essentially like the same power and toughness as a Death Watch Loyalist because of, well, 3 toughness being not that powerful, and it's oftentimes going to trade with something, which means that Death Watch Loyalist is just a better Rugged Survivors in a lot of situations in that specific deck. I know they're not the same card. I know there's different advantages to Rugged Survivors. The point is, there seems to be a big grit theme, and with a big grit theme, oftentimes they're going to have low power, high toughness, and that means you're perfect for Grand Inquisitor that can immediately attack and be an extremely powerful, aggressive deck. We've already seen how powerful things like Scout Bike Pursuer is in that deck, and, well, we already got a second one. Let's see what we can do with more, huh? That's going to wrap up the video, guys. Let me know what leaders you think are going to be really exciting. I think one of the other 2 leaders that I was kind of thinking about are going to be IG-88 and Grand Admiral Thrawn. Hera is something that I'm waiting, but because it's mainly focused on Underworld and kind of these shadowy characters and basically like the underdealings of the galaxy, right? I don't think we're going to see more Spectre cards, right? Because the Spectre cards are mainly either Rebels or, I mean, in some cases, you could potentially put like an Imperial card, like Agent Callus in, for example. I guess you could also put like Ahsoka in there as a Spectre card, right? Which might not fall under Rebels. Maybe Ahsoka is an Underworld theme card. Maybe we'll see an Ahsoka in set too. That could, make sense a little bit. So I think Hera is going to have to wait a little bit while longer for us to see some more Spectre cards. Otherwise, I would put Hera on the list as well. But IG-88 and Grand Admiral Thrawn are the 2 other decks that I'm really hoping to see some huge value. Of course, maybe we'll just see Sabine Green take over the meta with Echo. We will see. I don't know. Echo is pretty strong and Sabine's already pretty strong. There are definitely some arguments for every single leader on this list. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section down below, and I will see you all for a video tomorrow.